Brad, can I tell you about my superpower in a democracy? My own unique superpower?
I always assumed you had one, but I never knew what it was specifically.
Well, it's don't let the glasses fool you. There's underneath this Clark Kent exterior, there is a superpower, and I'll tell you what it is. I can get out of any jury duty,
really?
And I sit there calmly, and they call me forward, and they say, "Juror number 14, we have a couple questions for you." You know. Uh-huh. And they always say, "Have you ever been a victim of a crime?" And I always get to say, "Yes, I have." And this is where I light up like a Christmas tree. "Yes, I have." "Why, yes, prosecutor, I have." And they're like, "Could you describe it for us?" And I always say, "Well, I had a 9mm held to my forehead." Oh. And they always go, literally within seconds, you could see one or the other side always go, "Excused, excused, 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 excused." And so... all the time. It always gets me out. But Brad, I got called to jury duty recently, and I did not realize my kryptonite. I had a kryptonite to my superpower.
As all true superheroes do.
And you know what it is? My super jury duty get out of free card doesn't work when it's a financial crime, Brad.
Oh, no.
It was a financial crime, and there was also going to be a lot of accounting and bookkeeping. It did not work. My superhero power did not work.
Did I mention it was a 9mm checkbook?
I did not anticipate that. Oh, jeez. And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about your 9mm checkbook and making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the author of the Webcomics Handbook on Substack and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his delightful pal, Dave Kellett. I've never had a delightful before. Cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Strip. I guess if I need a hype man, it's got to be me.
Yeah, listen, you got to do it yourself. You got to be your own sidekick, too. And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And for those of you outside of the United States wondering what it's like to have a 9mm held to your forehead, it's terrifying. Oh. That's the short version. It's terrifying. I was super calm while it was happening, super calm, like oddly calm. And then afterward, when I called the cops, my legs would not stop shaking. They were doing like if you ever unbalanced a washing machine where it's just going, I couldn't stop my legs from shaking. So
I take it was a mugging.
It was a mugging, yes. And he got all his $7 off of me. Yeah. So I was really proud for the guy. I mean, I'm wearing flip-flops. What do you think you're going to get out of the guy? I'm clearly not Jeff Bezos. What are you robbing me for? So,
there was a great, this might have been an Animal Crackers cartoon where the guy,
comes up
behind.
Wow, is that harkening back? All
right. And he's mugging the guy from behind. He says, "Your money or your life?" And the guy says, "All I got in my pockets is lint." And there's a silent panel. He goes, "All right, your lint or your life."
I love that there is some synapse of your brain that's holding on to that Animal Crackers. You're like, "No, this is worth holding on to." Oh. I can't remember my son's birthday, but I'll remember. I
remember that panel by panel. It must have struck me as when I was 12-year-old as being redunculously funny, but I haven't been able to get rid of it.
Oh, Brad, that is delightful.
Your link to your life.
So speaking of delightful, Brad, I've got a question over on patreon.com/comiclab for you, Bradley J. Geiger, and I'm going to read it now. And this comes in from Shep, Brad. S-H-E-P, Shep.
Wait a minute, Shep. What? Last time I met a Shep, he was playing steel guitar for Loretta Lynn.
Last time I met a Shep, I think he was one of the replacement Three Stooges after Curly hit the road. Shep,
by the way, Shep's a perfectly nice name.
Shep is a great name, actually. Shep implies like you've seen the open road. Some about Shep feels like you've seen the Wild West a little bit. I like Shep.
Or at least some open source, yeah.
That caught me off guard. Anyway, so Shep writes in and says, "Hi, Comics Commanders. Delighted that I finally decided to take the plunge and become a Patreon backer over at patreon.com/comiclab.
Goodbye, Shep.
Yeah, we just lost him. Shep, I'm sorry. As I'm working my way through your extensive back catalog of invaluable and highly entertaining comics advice, my question is regarding eyes. E-Y-E-S,
right.
Eyes.
Not a lettering.
My cartoon style typically involves drawing just a black dot for the pupil to represent an eye, but occasionally there may be an expression or a character that seems to work better with the eye depicted as a white eyeball and a black pupil. Is it okay to use both styles in the same comic, or would the inconsistency of eye styles risk becoming a distraction? I've noticed that Dave sometimes uses both styles, so wondered if you had any rules that you stick to excuse me, if you had any rules that you stick to regarding eyes. Cheers, Shep. P.S. Keep up the fantastic work, gents. Your podcasts are absolutely brilliant. And might I suggest a Drunk Wrong Way episode?
Oh,
which, by the way, that's a fun idea.
Drunk Wrong Way.
Yeah,
I would do that. That would be a lot of fun.
Does YouTube have rules on that? Obviously, you probably couldn't show drinking.
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, can you find drunk history on YouTube?
I think so. I've seen my wife's episode on YouTube. So
there you go.
By the way, look, you guys, everyone should watch my wife's episode of Drunk History. She was delightful on it. They shooed me out of the room. I was not allowed to be there for the recording.
Oh, well.
Because apparently spouses and loved ones tend to try to stop the process.
Oh, really?
And they keep giving drinks as many as they want. And there's a doctor and a nurse on hand.
Yeah.
And they're like, nope, you got to go. What's his name? I forget what his name was, but he's like, no, you got to go.
We've been down this road before.
Yeah. They learn the hard way. They can't have them in the room. So, okay, anyway, eyes, Brad Geiger. So when you first started cartooning, when I first met you, you were doing Greystone Inn.
Yep.
And there were at least a few characters that I could think of that had what Shep describes as dot pupils, and that's it, right? I mean, can you talk to that for a minute?
Absolutely. This is actually something that has been low-key fascinating to me for my entire life. And you could write a wonderful research paper on this that when somebody decides, oh, I'm going to start doing comics, I want to start drawing and specifically cartooning, the first thing they have to figure out is, how do I draw eyes? Noses, they don't sit there and wonder about noses. They don't obsess about mouths or head shapes or fingers or feet. But you'll see a young cartoonist obsessing over eyes. And much like Shep, they figure they get locked into, I have to draw eyes a certain way.
Can I tell you why that is, Brad? I'm going to coin a phrase here that's never been said before in human history. It's because the eyes are the windows of the soul, Brad.
I think you're right. No, I am
that's a phrase
totally
I just
serious.
came up with. No one's ever said that before. So
wow, you're abundant with super phrases today. So the thing about it is, we think I've got to separate myself, and I have to have a style for drawing eyes, and then, like Shep, I've got to stick to that style, even though. We see through a lot of comics, and especially in manga, you can draw eyes differently from panel to panel, depending on the expression, depending on what's happening. They have they don't sit there and say, well, and by the way, this phrase is going to sound familiar because you've said this inside your head too. This is how I draw eyes. Right. This is how I draw eyes.
I have said that myself, so yes.
And working with beginners, and I do this, I saw this on a consultation just a couple of weeks ago. And this person, again, wanted to draw eyes different and differentiate himself through the way he drew eyes. Unfortunately, this led him to drawing square eyes. And
I see what you mean. Like, you know, the desire is so strong to be differentiated that you shoot yourself in the foot. Yeah.
And I get that sometimes eyes, if you're like frowning and the eyes are coming down or your cheeks are pushing up, that they can create certain lines. But when you are drawing and you realize that you have these hard edges, these hard corners on your eyes, it tends to give them a very uncanny valley kind of look very often. And by the way, I know this through most of the stuff that I know because it's a mistake that I've already made and had to learn from. Because when I started out Greystone Inn, if you look at those early comics, I had to draw eyes different.
Yes.
I had to draw them differently than everybody else. And I drew these, what's the best way to say? It wasn't a fully enclosed eye. It was a curve to show like the eyeball delineation. It was a little curve like a letter C.
Yes.
and then a
yes.
dot. And you see
Yes.
those all the time, except my curves were going to be very, very long vertical curves that went about 4 times longer, all the way up the guy's forehead, all the way up, and very skinny, awkward looking. Well, just look at some, you can still find it online. Look at some of my early Greystone Inn stuff. Horrible, right? But I was convinced, if you pulled me aside and said, Geiger, what are you doing? I'm doing eyes different because I need to stand out. This is my style.
Yes.
Right. And I didn't know anything about aesthetics at that point. I hadn't earned my aesthetics. So I didn't know style from a cow patty, but I was convinced that this was my style. And this is shades of what Shep is dealing with.
So first of all, I just want to say it's uncanny how often you and I have walked similar paths, because I'm going to hold up to my camera right now, Brad, my college character.
Yeah.
And I had literally the same thing. You can Google it at home. Just Google Dave Kellett, and my college comic strip was called 4 Food Groups of the Apocalypse.
Yeah.
And not a great title. And, but I also did the exact same eye technique that Brad did. I did these L or curved L or curved C.
An L is a good way to put it.
A curved L eye that went way up into the forehead, almost to the edge of the top edge of the hair.
Yeah.
And I thought at the time, I was 19, 20, 21. I thought at the time I was being so clever, and I'd never seen this before. And this was my standout thing. And the reason why I had never seen it before is because every professional cartoonist tried it and went, oh God, no, this is terrible.
Horrible. Yeah.
I'm never doing this. So my next step was, because I had pupils within, I think Brad did too, within those 2 dots.
Yep.
And instantly my cartooning got better when I dropped the large L's. It felt so naked. I don't know if you remember this feeling. When I dropped it felt so naked. But I realized that I was being too clever by half. You know, I thought I needed to differentiate so much. Where I needed to differentiate was better writing and better drawing. It was not in the eyes. So anyway, I'm with Brad on that. And what I will say that it's interesting to see that both Brad and I, who are products of roughly the same generation of cartooning, for the purposes of history, Brad's a little older.
Just for the purposes of history, we need to point that out. In case someone's
listening to this podcast a couple of 100 years from now, I just need them to know Brad's a little older.
A little older.
So, but we largely grew up reading the same comics. It's interesting that we both ended up with that same curved eye.
Yeah.
And the reason I mention that is because every period of cartooning, there is a sort of gestalt of like shared influences that seem to contribute to the same kind of cartooning. For example, Garfield, you look at Garfield's eyes, and then you look at the comic strip called Marvin, which also came out in the 80s.
Yes.
Virtually identical eyes. And it's interesting that that was a result probably of having grown up with cartoons in the 60s and 70s, and somehow Jim Davis and the guy that did Marvin, I forget what his name was, both ended up with those exact same eyeballs. And probably one influenced the other, let's be honest. But you get where I'm going with that, because Bloom County was kind of similar to Doonesbury and you know, this and that. I wonder, Brad, if we somehow, in the way recesses of our 18-year-old minds, both had, well, my 18-year-old mind at that time, Brad's 29-year-old mind, had the same. Got him!
Oh man.
The setup was worth it. It took a minute, but anyway, no. So in both of our young minds, we probably thought, well, this is a reaction to whatever came before, which was probably a reaction to Garfield. And oh, look at how different I am from Garfield, you know, or look at how different I am from Doonesbury. It didn't work. But now let's answer Shep's question, because how do we recommend approaching eyes? Because now you draw, by the way, to carry this story all the way through your college strip, and then to Greystone Inn, and then to Evil Inc., the comic strip, and then to Evil Inc., the graphic novel. Yeah. I have seen your eyes grow increasingly, if not realistic as the word, human stylistically accurate. You know, I would describe it as, you know.
So what happened was, as I finally abandoned those, like instead of a C dot, it was an L dot, right? When I finally abandoned those L dot eyes, I went back to more of a C.I in the early Evil Inc. If you look at those, like Evil Inc. Annual Report Volume 1, the cover
I've
of
got
that.
I've got it here in my bookshelf. I'm going to grab it while you're talking. Yeah.
Really great example of that, where she had kind of a C.I. And what happened in those early Evil Inc. comics, I realized that for what I was doing, for the kind of emotion that I was going for the kind of art I was going for, the dot eyes limited my emotional range, right? It just, let's face it, I just couldn't get the emotions and I couldn't get the look that I was after with those. So my eyes, I started drawing, starting with an oval and drawing an oval eye, much closer, not quite like Walt Disney, because those kind of got very stylized as well. But I just gave myself the freedom to draw an oval and then a circle inside of it with a little dot that approximated an eye. And then I would draw lines that would push up into that, like for the cheeks if they were smiling, or down if they were frowning. And I realized for me, I had a lot greater emotional range. So, and of course, my art was always leaving minimalism and going towards a very distinct look.
Right.
And so the eyes had to change, right? If I had gone the other direction, I might be telling a very different story. To which the answer for Shep is stop obsessing about it. Stop work. You don't have to have a style for eyes, right? If your character has dots for eyes in panel 1 and has a big expression in panel 2, give that character bug eyes. Give that character Garfield eyes. Give that character a C.I. Or like in panel 3, if they get very emotional and their eyes are welling up with tears, give them very hyper realistic eyes, like Ren and Stimpy used to do. Right. The best advice that I can give Shep is to stop obsessing, stop thinking that he's got to have a style, and instead ask himself what makes this character look the best in this moment. And what's going to happen is, after you solve all of those art problems over and over and over for a few years, it's the same thing I say all the time. Style isn't something you drive towards. It's something you see in the rearview mirror.
Yep.
You're going to look in that rearview mirror and say, oh, I guess I have a style for that because I've solved these artistic problems over and over. I've got a shorthand now. And really, that shorthand is another word for what your style is.
Yeah. So let's start with where Shep is. So Shep says, my cartoon style typically involves drawing just a black dot for the pupil to represent an eye.
Yeah.
I want to argue, Shep, that is actually a great place to start from as sort of the base level eye for whatever your character needs to do. That's what Ziggy did. That's what Hello Kitty did. That's what Peanuts did. The dot as a basic eye form. That's what Scott C did, our guest from a couple weeks back.
Yeah.
The dot as a single eye form is actually oddly communicative because of the human brain's ability to see a face even in a car front. You know what I mean? I forget what the word is escaping me, but the brain's ability to see faces and everything. You put two dots, even roughly parallel, and they are interpreted as a face. And so as a baseline, you put a wiggle, a curved C around them like Snoopy does, suddenly it's a side eye. Yeah. You put a raised eyebrow above it, suddenly it's shock. You put a V line down between them, suddenly it's anger. You know, you get where I'm going with this. Like that actually is a really expressive way to do eyes on a repeatable, simplistic, easily printable and replicable idea. Good Lord. You get where I'm going with that. So there's a reason why Schultz did that, why Hello Kitty did that. I mean, Hello Kitty, by the way, she's not a kitty. She's a little girl.
Yeah.
That's bullshit. That is bullshit. She has ears. She has whiskers. She is not a little girl. That's a cat. Her name is Hello Kitty. She's a cat. All of her friends are animals. It would be weird if she was a little girl. She's a cat.
No, she said, I've never really understood Hello Kitty. I wouldn't mind cashing some Hello Kitty checks, but I've never understood it.
Imagine that sweet, sweet Hello Kitty money. Anyway,
oh my goodness, yes.
But yeah, so as far as Brad goes, as Brad's advice earlier, I often do the same. So the dot is sort of my baseline, and it's up to you whether you want to do the dot like Peanuts or the tiny circle dot like Watterson with Calvin and Hobbes. They're both kind of similar and used interchangeably by different cartoonists. But anyway, as that is your baseline, Brad's right. Then you can decide, what do I need for this panel? What do I need for this punchline? What do I need for this moment? And then you can go bug eye, you can go side eye, you can go stern, you can go all sorts of stuff. And I love the idea too that Ren and Stimpy, along with French comics, by the way, French comics do this really well, where Tonton, I should say, let's pronounce it correctly, not Tintin, Tonton. Tonton would often do this thing, and Japanese comics do this thing, where if someone picks up a sword, it's iconic. But then when they look at the sword and the panel changes to looking at it up close, highly detailed, right?
Right.
And so Ren and Stimpy had that. Tonton had that. A lot of manga has that, where iconic object, iconic object, iconic object, and then you look at it up close, super detailed object, which is drawn almost a little differently. You know, it's not. It's more realism than iconicity. And so your eyes can do that too. If you need a moment where, I mean, comics are flexible. They are malleable. Readers understand that as a language. I wouldn't do it every day. Although if you do it every day, go with God. If that's what works for you, great. You know, there are comics up there that change their eyes virtually every panel for what they need. Don't you think?
And I guess that's where I come back to is especially at this stage of the game, Shep, don't try to lock yourself in. Your main thrust right now ought to be what gives this character the best look in this moment.
Yes.
And to get locked into what I did at a very young age, what Dave did, this is my style. This is how I draw eyes. To get locked into that, it's just going to cause you problems later on, because then what happens next is eventually you do develop the aesthetic, you do develop the ability to tell good from bad, and a better sense of where you want your art to start looking like that, a new zone. And then you say to yourself, and I've seen this 100 times, well, I can't change because that's not how I draw eyes. And then you box yourself in, you're stymied in.
You've created your own limitations.
Well, I can't do that. That's not how I draw eyes. Well, draw eyes differently. And again, you'd never do that with fingers. You just start drawing fingers differently. You wouldn't give it a second thought. Yeah. But there's something about eyes. So I say, don't get too wound up about this. Don't lock yourself in. Your emphasis should be on making the best looking character, making that character look the best in that panel, and start drawing as many panels as you can. And then only then, when you see all the ones that worked and all the ones that didn't, then you can look back and start to fall into a certain type of style. But God knows, don't call it your style. Your style is going to change 100 times between now and the time you put your pen down. And that's a good thing. It's supposed to happen.
It is.
Don't lock yourself in.
Yeah, and listen back again to the last 30 seconds of what Brad just said too, which is basically that the experimentation.
Well, wait a minute. Listen to everything I said. What do you mean the last 30 seconds? Listen to everything I said. Everything is gold dripping from my head over here.
Careful, you'll get a 9mm to your forehead there with the gold dripping off your head like that. No, but what Brad was saying is the experimentation and the attempts of like, maybe this is the best eye to do for this panel. Yeah. That will eventually get you to your style, because over the course of a couple hundred and then eventually a couple thousand comics, you'll go, oh no, that eye is never called for in this world. Right. But this other eye that I experimented with, hey, that's really works in my style and my look, and you incorporate it and it becomes a frequent use. And so you'll see in Sheldon and in Drive, it's not even consistent with, so to answer your second follow-up question, as far as consistency and rules of thumb, with Drive, it is, because I have different aliens, it's kind of species specific.
Yeah.
Which in a way could be character specific in your comic strip. There are comics that have, this character always has one type of eye and this other character always has a different type of eye. And it works. I've seen those. I can't think of one at the moment, but I know they exist, and I can probably put it on the Discord server later. But anyway, you get where I'm going with that, is that sometimes cartoonists decide this character is always angry. Therefore, we will never see their eyes. They'll always have a heavy brow with a heavy, eyebrow over it. This character is always nervous. So like normal, the eyes will always be bigger than Garfield and the pupils will always be smaller, you know? And so it's a slightly different eye. And you get where I'm going with that, is that you can have that be species, be characters. So my own rule of thumb is what best represents the character, and that's the main thrust of what I do. And then what best represents this moment? What is needed in this moment? If I need the eyes to do the heavy lifting, what do I need the eyes to do? What do I need them to look like? And that can vary panel to panel and comic to comic.
Yeah.
So how about you, Brad? Do you have a rule of thumb for who gets what eyes and when they get certain eyes? Or
in general, I've got to a point where I kind of have a similar approach to all of them. But just like you just got done saying, just before we sat down, I had to draw a character with somebody who was very surprised at what was happening. And so I drew her eye, but then instead of having an iris and a pupil, she's just got a dot, right? To show that her, she's almost dilated, or the opposite of dilated. There's just nothing but shock there, where normally I'd have two circles, a circle with a dot inside of it. It's just a dot inside of that larger white eye, right? Right. Because she's got to be really, really surprised. To the same extent, by the way, that for a long time, for me particularly, when I started shifting the look of Evil Inc., I got a little bit trapped in by mouths. I'm like, well, that mouth can only line up with the middle of the eye on both sides, right? Like it's supposed to. Anatomically, the sides of your mouth line up with the middle of your eye. Well, in a cartoon, if you do that, you're very limited for expressions, because sometimes that character that I just drew over that mouth goes all the way back to the ear because she's got her mouth wide open. Right. Well, if you've got to give yourself the latitude to do that, and you can't say, well, that's not like I did, by the way. Well, that's not my style for drawing mouths. No, you've got to make that character in that moment exude everything that is happening there. You've got to sell that moment and then go out and solve new problems in the next panel. And just to balance this out, we're not advocating. Do you remember the episode of Futurama where Zoidberg becomes a director? Yes. And he's like, I need more waving of hands and I need more people jumping around in the background. And everything was over the top. We're not advocating that everything be over the top. What we are advocating is that in the moment that you need it to be over the top, you're not limited by your own sense of style. You do what works within that character design and that panel design and the needs of that panel and that comic page. It is site appropriate. It's moment appropriate. It's not necessarily just, maximum hyperbole for maximum hyperbole's sake. So, and the thing, I'm with you in terms of symmetry and the human face and following the rules of a human face. Comics are very forgiving. I keep coming back to this, but they're elastic. And for that, think of I'm trying to think of cartoonists that do this. Ted Rall or Super Fabulous Comics, the eyes don't even sit on the face, you know? They're floating a half inch off the side of the face. And yet you and I and everyone who reads it goes, well, that's a human face. No, it's not. It's not all a human face. But because of the elasticity of comics, we're very forgiving of that. And that's why, to Brad's point, having a mouth that lines up perfectly with the eye form, yes, that's technically correct, but it frankly is not as communicative as you want it to be because the mind allows for more elasticity with comics than you would think, Yeah, there's a guy whose work is very popular on Reddit, and I'm afraid I'm not pulling up his name right now, or I don't even know, I don't know who this is. So they've got this, the way they draw people, one eye always floats outside of the head. Like it's
Yeah, isn't that super fabulous? Or maybe
It might
I have
be.
it wrong.
I don't know. But like one of the eyes always just floats off the head, you know?
Yeah.
And that's how this person solved their art problems, right? That's how they approach it. But I guarantee if you look back, you'll see that this was the result of a whole evolution. I don't want you to skip right to the last part of the evolution. Well, I'm going to draw an eye that floats outside the head too. Then I can be different. Listen, you've got to find what looks best when you draw it.
Right.
My characters would not look good like this. Dave's characters would not look good like that because we all draw differently, right?
Yep.
And you've got to find the one, and it's just got to be through trial and error. And again, not locking yourself in to find out what that is for you.
Right. And so just for folks that wanted to go look at that, I was right. The name is Super Fabulous Comics. Brad, please forgive my older co-host that he couldn't remember the name. It's Super Fabulous Comics. How unnecessary a shot. How unnecessary. I don't know. I've never done the age ones before, but all of a sudden I'm coming at you. I don't know.
That's okay. With age has come my ability to not let that stuff bother me.
Yeah.
It's perfectly fine.
Yes.
I can take it and not take any umbrage at all.
Thank you. And I'm grateful that you're not allowing my youthful inexperience to get in the way of hosting the show. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Oh, wait a minute. Do you hear that? That sound can only mean one thing. It's time for Susan MacTaggart to come and make her personal affirmation. As you know, everybody at the $10 level of Comic Lab at Patreon gets a personal affirmation from Susan MacTaggart. Oh, geez. Wait a minute. Where'd Dave go? Well, anyway, Susan, welcome to the show.
Oh, Bradley John, delightful to see you. Delightful to see you, young man. Oh, my goodness. And a huge shout out to Spanx for Men. Spanx for Men. Bradley John looking amazing today. Amazing.
I told you I don't want any Spanx.
Perish the thought. I'm blushing like a young teen again, Bradley John.
I'm telling you, we've got a great person up, and it is Dennis Accardi who's going to get a personal affirmation from you.
Oh, Dennis, my sweetheart, my love. I'm going to pull you in close. Dennis, it's time for your personal affirmation here on patreon.com with that little delicious dish, Bradley John Geiger. Okay, Dennis, here's what you need to know, sweetheart. The world needs to hear your unique voice, Dennis. Your unique voice. We need it. The world needs it. But not your singing voice, sweetheart. Let's keep that in the shower. Let's keep that in the shower, Dennis. Oh, sweetheart.
Susan, do you like to sing in the shower?
Oh, Bradley John, only duets, you little saucy dog. Only duets, you little saucy dog. I see what you're doing, Bradley John.
Well, Susan MacTaggart, thank you so much for bringing a personal affirmation over to our friend Dennis over at patreon.com/comiclab, and we will see you next week.
Bradley John, always a delight. And again, a huge shout out to Spanx for Men. Spanx for Men, keeping the guts in since 2015. Good job, Bradley John.
And that was Susan MacTaggart and Dave. Okay, there you are. You're back now.
But hold on, putting the headphones on. Yep.
Yeah.
How can I help?
So Susan MacTaggart was great. She brought out a personal affirmation. And while we've got a pause in the action, we should probably mention our sponsor for today's show, DreamHost.
Absolutely. This is our own kind of affirmation because Brad and I can wholeheartedly endorse a sponsor like DreamHost. Because Brad and I are, it's like that old thing, we bought the company. We are full and excited customers of DreamHost for years now. I will say, without any prompting, no money involved, DreamHost is drop dead the best host I've ever had. I've had some bad ones in the past.
Oh, yeah.
And so they have sponsored Comic Lab with our enthusiastic endorsement because over at dreamhost.com/Comic Lab, they have put up 2 special offers that you can jump in super easy and as a way of dipping your toe in the water with DreamHost. They've made it really easy to jump in.
Absolutely. And if you're interested, you can go right over to dreamhost.com/comiclab and you can see they've got hosting plans built just for you. Their shared starter plan is locked in for the first 3 years.
3 years, by the way. Not like
years.
not like a 30-day trial. That actually surprised me. I was like, wow, 3 years. That's legit.
That's $259 a month for 3 years. And that gives you a website. You can include a domain with that, unlimited traffic, WordPress installer, free automated WordPress migrations if you're bringing over from another host that maybe didn't treat you so good. Business advisor, it says here, built-in traffic analytics. If a lot of people are putting more of an attention on their website, as part of what we've been saying on this show, if you want to own and control your own work, part of that means having a website. Part of that means partnering with the host like DreamHost. And sometimes people are like, well, does that mean I need to start watching my traffic again? You don't have to. In my opinion, I've taken Google Analytics out because I don't want to deal with them anymore. And DreamHost has built-in traffic analytics that I use on a regular basis to chart, for example, the effectiveness of what I'm doing with my web ring right now. I'll take a look at that and I'll say, oh, I can see the bump. I can see what's happening there. So I haven't needed to go back and reinstall Google Analytics because DreamHost's built-in traffic analytics did the trick.
And I will add one more thing onto that, and I will sing this with great praise because it has saved my bacon a couple of times, is that the tech support on DreamHost is legit, and it is a person, and they go out of their way until the problem is solved to fix it, usually because it's a problem that Dave Kellett solved on his own website. It's not DreamHost's tech problem. It was mine. I moved something that I shouldn't have or clicked something that I shouldn't have. But the point being, there is a human on the other end, and they're always very kind, and they always take you through it and fix whatever problem Dave Kellett has solved on Dave Kellett's website, and they are great. I honest to God, it is my favorite host that I've ever used, and so do head over to dreamhost.com/comiclab. Hey, gang, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we'll tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
Yeah, because when you do, you'll get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And you'll get access to our exclusive Discord server, a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And ho Nelly, if you want even more comics goodness in your life, check out the new drawing show that we're doing with our pal Kevin McShane over at wrongwayshow.com. That's wrongwayshow.com.
In each episode, we'll show you how to draw your favorite cartoon characters the wrong way.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
So, Dave, it's time for another question from one of our Patreon backers, and it goes like this. This coming in from Scott, who says, longtime listener, first-time questioner. I was wondering if either of you had thoughts on experience with comics anthologies, either as contributors or as editors. A friend of mine who runs a small indie publisher recently tried to put together such an anthology. They'd already successfully produced and marketed 2 books, and they offered generous terms to contributors. But after a few months, the project fell apart as key dates for turning in writing and art were missed and pushed back. I'd love to hear your takes on what needs to happen to make a comic anthology successful in terms of getting it completed and out the door, and as creative professionals, if or when you think it's worthwhile to participate in an anthology as a contributor. Love the podcast, and I have scrubbed so many dishes while listening to your delightful banter. Thanks, and a special hello to Brad from a former Akron Canton dweller. Nice, somebody from Northeast Ohio, where I used to spend an awful lot of time.
Wait, if you left Akron and he left Akron, how many people are left in Akron now? There can't be that many left.
Nobody of any importance, I know that.
There's only 6 or 7 people left in Akron at this point. Yeah. So this is a great question because we have not talked about anthologies, I think, since like year 1 of Comic Lab.
We talked really early about anthologies.
Yeah, okay. So my memory was right there. It's been a while, but I will be honest that while I can see a anthology working if the right people are involved in the right situation and the right conditions, like, for example, what Kazu was able to do with Flight, which I thought he carried off very well, and they all carried off very well. For the most part, Brad, I'm just going to be honest and say I personally am not the biggest fan of anthologies.
Yeah.
Mostly because it always seems to be one very driven person who's going to organize this anthology and we're going to bring it all together. And then 15 other people who kind of can't get their act together to do their own career and their own stuff. So they're happy to do this anthology. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And as you were talking, I looked it up. We started the show in January of 2018. The show that we talked about Anthologies was January 20th, 2019. So you were absolutely right. It was right squarely in about the first year of the show. Yeah. And we basically said we hated anthologies. For the most part, we hated most anthologies. And like Dave points out, there are good ones. Frankly, technically, Tales of the Drive is an anthology series and one that I'm very happy to be part of and have enjoyed as a reader. But in general, anthologies are just not, for the two guys on this podcast, we're not big on anthologies, mainly for the reasons that you just laid out, right? In other words, you just got done saying that this person wanted to put an anthology together, was offering very generous terms, right? So I would assume, reading between the lines, that you had signed on, you were going to do something for this, you had already started preparing work for this, you had written it, maybe even penciled it and begun inking it. Yep. And then because other people couldn't hit their deadlines, the thing fell apart. Meanwhile, you're sitting there with work that you were preparing for this anthology that you're going to have to find some way to repurpose, right?
Yes.
That would drive me up the wall. I would be absolutely, and knowing that it's possible would prevent me from ever participating in another anthology again.
Yeah. And I want to give you some context of where this is coming from. You're listening to two guys who love their fellow cartoonists, love their fellow artists, have enjoyed different projects with different artists, but have been burned more than a few times in their career by either the incompetence or the lowered energy levels of other cartoonists they are doing projects with. That's a polite way of saying lowered energy levels. That you can translate that to mean missed deadlines, things that were promised that were going to get done that didn't get done. Things that promised were going to be done to a certain quality that weren't done to a certain quality. And so Brad and I, over the course of our 25-year careers, maybe, I don't know, what is it? Is it 25 for you as well,
25
Brad?
For me as well, yes.
Not 45. Okay. So
just 25. No,
unnecessary shots. Unnecessary shots. But anyway, who have both learned, by the way, on different projects with different people, that eventually other cartoonists have disappointed us, and so we're like, I'll do it myself. Basically, I'll do it myself and I'll do it better. And frankly, that's kind of what we did, because we know that we could rely on ourselves, and if we couldn't rely on ourselves, we knew who to get mad at, and we knew how to get them moving if we needed to, right? When you're working with an anthology, remember my first description of it. It's one very driven person and 10 to 15 people who kind of are half-ass and not doing their own stuff. You know what I mean? Because if they were doing their own stuff, they wouldn't be doing an anthology. That's more often the case. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes.
If they were drivers, if they were like creating their own stuff and trying to get it out in the world, they wouldn't be out seeking anthologies they could do. They'd be putting up their own site and putting together their own books and doing their own stuff. So what I have found to be the case is that anthologies, when they work, they either work in one of two situations. There's a magical period, usually at the end of people's 20s, where their careers haven't taken off yet, but their level of professionalism has started, right? Yeah. And so I'm just saying when it works, I've noticed this pattern, that they're all kind of producing their own stuff, but they are all still buddies, and they all still, unlike Brad and I, they're not burnt by the world yet. Yeah. And so they're like, yeah, sure, I'll do an anthology. And they all produce great work for it. They all get it in on time. The one super driven person gets it to the printer, and lo and behold, it comes out and it's great, right? I've noticed that happens. And then I've noticed situations like Flight, where Kazu very wisely went to mostly animators, mostly people who get shit on by their industry and frankly work to death and who can draw very fast. But, and this is key, have not done comics per se since college probably, right? Yeah. And he very wisely went to animation folks for the most part, and they put together a beautiful series of books. Yeah. Because for them, it was a great outlet that was a sideline to their animation. They were professionals. They knew how to produce. They could draw fast, but they just weren't in comics. So those are the kind of the two conditions, either the magical like 5-year window of when people have the professionalism, Brad, but don't yet have their own career going, right? That I've seen that with anthologies that work. And then the other one is where they're pulled in from other careers, where they pulled in from comic books, from animation, from storyboarding, from advertising. I've seen one advertising group that did a pretty cool anthology because it was just so different than what they normally do.
Yeah.
How about you, Brad? When do you have you seen anthologies work, or is it the same kind of situation?
I'm afraid I don't have anything to add to that. And I don't have any of my own advice on that. Because again, everything about it I don't like. Right? It just even from the standpoint of somebody, if I wanted to host an anthology, if I wanted to be the editor of an anthology, right? I've got to get all these people, and I would imagine 80% of them understand print ready art and working in CMYK and working in high res and giving me stuff that's ready to go and hitting the right size and not understanding what a trim is and what a bleed is. Yes. And I know I would pull my hair out by the roots with the other 20% who doesn't know some or all of that stuff. Right. So I don't have any advice for this question asker, because as soon as I hear the word anthology, I want to do that Brad Geiger two-step that I was suggesting last week, where you turn 180 degrees and run like hell. I don't want anything to do with an anthology. The whole thing makes me angry. Like I'm just angry. Wow, that's strong. Like, I'm angry just thinking about it. So I don't have. I'm angry because listen, everything we just got done saying, everything I just said about the 80-20%, not throwing a whole bunch of people that don't know how to hit a deadline. And bring this whole fucking thing down because they don't know how to hit a deadline. And now I've got work on my hands that I've got to try and repurpose. And what could I have been doing with that time if I wasn't angry? Is how I feel about this stuff.
Let me flip it on its edge now. So Brad and I have told you how we feel about anthologies as cartoonists, as professionals. Now let me tell you how I feel about them as a reader, right?
Boy, and if you thought it was a bad conversation, just wait.
Jeez. Brad's warming up more cussing. He's like, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, here we go.
No, but here's Dave Kellett's experience with any anthology, even pro-level anthologies. Yeah. I flip it open. There's two that are extraordinary. What short stories. The art was amazing. The writing was amazing. The every page flip was a perfect pagination. It was great. Wonderful. The execution. Yeah. There's two, right? Like that.
Yep.
And then there's 13 that I just want to throw off a train. Because I'm like, what? Who thought this was anthology worthy? Like, the coloring is wrong, the paneling is weird, the lettering is off, the writing is stilted. And I'm like, those other two were beautiful. What happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. Those are the two that are going to go on to have a great career. And the other 13 are kind of sitting with their finger up their nose, second knuckle. You know what I mean? It's like, by the way, second knuckle, you really got to be working to get that second knuckle up there.
You got to really be after something up there. You got to have the Hope Diamond.
And I'm just telling you the truth. That's how I feel often as a consumer, as a reader of anthologies. Brad, how do you often feel as a consumer of anthologies?
Just like you, except with about 10% more vitriol. Yeah, I mean, you just explained it exactly. It's a horrible in very many cases. So I don't inadvertently, insult one of my friends who does an anthology that I'm not thinking of at the moment. In almost every case, it's exactly what you just explained. It's a horrible reading experience. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what the upside is. I don't know what I would encourage our question asker to work on their own work. And if you're looking for good advice on anthologies, I'm sure somebody out there has got that advice. Dave and I don't have that advice.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the next time we have Kazu on, we should ask him what his advice would be for young anthologists. Is that the word? Anthologists?
Anthologists? That sounds good.
Yeah. What his advice would be for young anthologists, because it's also telling to me that Flight stopped.
Yeah.
Because if you look about it, they all went on to do their own stuff and with great success. And so that's why I say it always seems that when it works, in the rare occasions when it works, they always seem to be in their late 20s, maybe early 30s, where their art is humming, their writing is on point. They know how to hit a deadline because they've taken a few for hire jobs. Yeah. And they're excited to do this with their pals, and they turn it in and it works, you know. But a lot of times you get the two people that are driving and know how to hit a deadline and know how to create comics. And they produce these amazing stories. And then you get 13 people that are like, I'm picking up a baby bumblebee, you know, and you're like, come on.
And those are the people that bring it all crashing down. Yeah. They're either going to bring it crashing down in that they're going to have the entire book canceled, or they're going to bring it crashing down because they're going to hit their deadline and you're going to look at the book and wish that they hadn't.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's also the case that, like, a lot of anthologies are themed, which is very clever marketing. Wonderful. You know, like, hey, this whole anthology is all sports short stories, or this whole anthology is all sci-fi short stories, or this is all romance short stories, right? Yeah. But then this is another thing that drives me nuts as a consumer, is that I'm reading through and 14 of them will be romance short stories, and then all of a sudden there's one about turtles, and I'm like, why is this here?
Yeah, what's going on?
It's and part of that is, I get it. It's hard to be an editor, and it's even harder to be an editor when you hired one of your friends to do one of the 15 stories. You know,
you just put your finger on it right there. When you hire one of your friends, you can't say no.
Yeah, especially because they've turned in their 10 pages, and you're like, darn it, Jim. Come on, Jim. You knew this was about romance stories. What's with the two turtles? God, Jim.
Do the turtles ever smooch?
No, they don't. Brad, it's a whole story about accounting in a turtle pond and how the one accountant. It's a terrible story. Jim doesn't know what he's doing. I don't know, Jim. Get your shit together.
The best thing he came up with was the title, Shell Game. And then after that, it went down. So, Dave, just to wrap up the show, we've got another question from patreon.com/comiclab, and it goes like this. Hope you're all doing well. I've been using my web host for a while now to host my portfolio, but there isn't much traffic being led to the site. Should I switch my hosting to something else, or is this more of an SEO problem I need to study up on? Thanks for the knowledge you guys share on the show. You all rock. So Dave, and I can confirm, by the way, the host is not DreamHost, but I didn't want to single out any host in particular, of course. But this is something that anybody from any host could ostensibly ask themselves. They're not getting any traffic to their website, so they think, is it my host?
Right. Right. And I will answer you without even thinking about it. No, it's not the host.
No,
and it's not SEO. And it's not even your fault. And it's not even the audience's fault. And I'll tell you what I mean by that is that this kind of website that's not a repeatingly updated comic.
Yeah.
You just aren't going to get the foot traffic. And I'll tell you why, because it's going to have maybe 5 moments in the year that it needs to shine.
Right.
Somebody key is going to need to be clicking into your portfolio because they're going to try to hire you and they want to see what you're capable of, you know? Yeah. So a portfolio site is you just want to have that art director click in, go, got it. Yep. I see they can do that. Okay. They can do watercolors. Okay. They can do airbrush. Okay. Yep. Other character design is strong. Click off. They might not even look again. Right. If they're a good art director, they know what their opinion was just based on that first look. They'll never look again. You know what I mean? They'll be like, yeah, all right, we're going to hire or not hire this person. Right.
Yep.
And so, in the meantime, Brad and I, who are not hiring anybody and not actively looking to hire anybody, we will never go to a site like that, right?
Right.
And then there's the average reader who might, if they just like your style, they're like, yeah, I'd like to click through, and they'll look through once. That's the thing. They'll look through once. They're not going to come back again to look again. I mean, maybe in a blue moon. I have looked at portfolios where I go, oh, I've seen this before. Oh, yeah, I looked a couple of years ago, you know, and you go, oh, that's a very good style. Yeah, I remember why I liked it. But there's am I wrong, Brad, in saying there's no need to go back again, and there's nothing really driving them to go unless they're hiring you with a portfolio site?
No, I mean, so just to pull back the curtain, this person with this question sent us his URL. We looked at his website. It's not what I would call a webcomic website where I like sheldoncomics.com, where Dave is posting a new Sheldon comic there, and there's an archive and all that stuff. Right. This is more of an illustrator's portfolio. And Dave hit the nail right on the head. These are not high traffic sites. You don't measure by the amount of traffic. You measure by, is this bringing me good work? And all it takes is one a person that with a paying job to answer that question. Now, you mentioned SEO. If you wanted to put a little bit of time into SEO on this, because I see like a lot of stuff, I can just click and it shows me a larger view, and there's no words there to spider. There's nothing to drive the SEO that I can see. If you wanted to put a little thought into SEO, I would be behind that 100%. Yep. However, long before you get too wrapped up in doing that, I would go back to what we do recommend on this show, and that is to make your website the hub of your social media activities. In other words, you should be posting this stuff that you've got on the portfolio website on your social media, and then saying, here's this drawing of a barbarian, fishing off the pier, and to see other work like that, go to my portfolio, right? Yeah. And then you've got a chance to get discovered and to have the SEO of that social media platform working in your favor. Agreed. And again, remember, because this happens all the time. Somebody says, well, I did post that. Nothing happened. Well, post it again. We make huge mistakes when we think on social media, when we think people are paying attention. Nobody's paying attention. You want to post that fishing barbarian next month? Post him, right? Yeah. Reuse, recycle, reformat. Find a different way to post
the three R's. Did we just come up with the three R's, Brad, right there?
Yes, the three R's. What is not of social media? Yeah, but yeah, the three R's of
reuse, recycle, and repost. Was that what you said?
Repurpose. Yeah. Let's say you use that illustration.
So it's great to have the three R's. That's awesome.
Yes. Oh, I always go for a good mnemonic, right? But let's say today is National Fishing Day. Just use my imaginary barbarian fishing off the pier.
Sure.
Hey, for National Fishing Day, take a look at this guy. I wonder if he's catching anything. Blah, blah, blah. There's my illustration. So there's lots of ways for you to do that. You can certainly look into SEO on your website, but I think you're pointing the fingers in the wrong direction. I think it's not your web host that's holding you back. It might not even be SEO. I'd want to see something like this and then go check out your social medias and see, is this person out there on social media pointing back to this website? That would be the big one for me.
Yeah. But if you wanted to do SEO, it is certainly not going to hurt you. I would put 15, 20, 25 keywords of what the drawing is: dogs, trees, sunsets, whatever, that kind of something that couldn't be spidered. Put the materials that you use to draw it, or if not the materials, what digital tools you use to draw it, right? Photoshop work, Illustrator work, Cintiq, Wacom, this or that. And then you could also, if you wanted to, you could put a little one-sentence artist statement underneath it. I drew this while imagining, bippity boppity boo. It puts a little injection of personality in there, gives it a little bit more spiderable stuff for SEO. But like Brad said, I don't know that SEO is the problem, just because I don't know that honestly, I don't know that this kind of site ever gets a huge ton of traffic in the same way that a daily Calvin and Hobbes comic strip appearing on Go Comics would get daily traffic, because it's serving a different purpose. And the purpose it's serving is you don't have to physically mail out to 1,000 art directors anymore printouts of your work. Now, if you ever get a hook of them, they can come to your website, check out your work, and potentially hire you or recommend you for a job or tell a friend about them. That's really what a portfolio site is supposed to be doing. It's not so much a traffic proposition. It's a conversion proposition for the 1 to 10 people you would get a year who could hire you for a job.
Yep, absolutely. That is exactly right. Well, I know what my job is. My job is to say that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my dear friend Brad Geiger, freshly stepped out of the fountain of youth. He's the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com. And he's the co-host of the new drawing show at wrongwayshow.com, which, by the way, I love it so much. If you have not checked it out, wrongwayshow.com. I love it, I love it, I love it.
And my good friend, the delightful Dave Kellett, the youthful co-director of the comics documentary Stripped, and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and Drive at drivecomic.com, and another wonderful co-host of the drawing show at wrongwayshow.com. Our last show was about Woody, and I'm telling you, I had that song going through my head for the rest of the afternoon after I watched that. It's just an amazing show.
Honest to God, if you are a patron of Wrong Way Show, there is an extended joke in there that I accidentally stumbled on that it's one of the funniest things I have ever said in my life. And I'm saying this about my own joke, which tells you how accidentally funny it was. Yeah. It became like a 10-minute runner in the long version for Patreon.
And we just kept going back to it and going back to it. And it was and to hear Dave talk about this particular topic in song, no less, and in doing a voice, no less. It is, if you want an instant way to cure your blues of doom scrolling, you want to go over to patreon.com/wrongwayshow and check out that extended cut. It is so good.
And just to give a teaser so that you can see what made Brad so damn delighted, it was a song about herpes, and I came up with it on the spot, and then it became a runner, and it is so damn funny.
He does it in a Randy Newman voice. I'm telling you, you're going to be happy for the rest of the day.
And I will say the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. You may hear your review featured on a future episode. And don't forget to give us a 5-star review on Spotify, where we are burning up the podcast charts. You know, Dave, that's kind of the neat thing about this show is that, yes, we encourage you to join our community on patreon.com/comiclab. But let's say that that's not in your budget right now, but you still want to kind of show support for the podcast that you love so much week after week. You can do that, not spend a nickel, and do all kinds of great things for us. You can go over to, if you haven't left a review on Apple Podcasts, doesn't cost a thing. If you haven't given us a 5-star review on Spotify, doesn't cost a thing. If you haven't subscribed to the Wrong Way Show YouTube channel yet, helps us immensely, doesn't cost you a thing. You don't have to spend a 1 red cent to be a good person today.
I'll tell you what, friendship doesn't cost you anything. Doesn't cost you anything. And it makes Brad Geiger smile, just like herpes. So I will say Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So I will go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com.
Don't you call me old.
You have never interrupted me before when I was doing this, saying it twice. You have never This is breaking a sacrosanct rule that we have on the show, that I finish off the show with a clean edit. You have I am upset. I am angry that you have. This is ridiculous. I won't stand for this. I'm not coming in next week. Tune in next week when Kevin McShane is replacing me.
I'm sorry. I'll stand off to the side, away from the microphone. You do your last line.
Patreon.com/geriatric. There we go.
Son of a bitch!